Weird times for retro fans. Ports and remasters of old classics have multiplied massively since the era of Switch. Yet at the same time, negative headlines became more and more. On Switch, an N64 emulator launched with drastic slowdowns in Mario Kart and missing basic graphical effects in Ocarina of Time. Sony's equivalent drew attention shortly after due to ghosting effects in slow PAL versions of digital PS1 games, following the subpar emulation of the PS1 Mini. A port of Chrono Cross from Square Enix ran slower on PS5 than on PS1. The Final Fantasy Pixel remasters were half improved and half borked. The GTA trilogy was completely ruined, and even a Pac-Man collection launched with bugs and input delay, which all raises the question, man, what is going on here? Porting Pac-Man or Zelda was no problem for decades, while hackers go way beyond, pushing out ultra widescreen versions of the same games at double FPS in what feels like an afternoon. And many unofficial emulators play most retro systems perfectly. Half-baked ports of games and badly tuned emulators have always existed. During the old boom of PS2 remasters, there was a really bad Silent Hill 2 port with missing graphical effects and repair attempts with Comic Sans. A port of the first Sonic game on GBA was considered an unplayable disaster. However, such examples stood out as exceptions, not the rule. But since then, the ratio seemed to slowly tilt in the other direction. At the same time, collections and remasters are a good and, in a way, important thing. After all, illegal emulation tends to be limited to existing fans and is difficult to communicate to outsiders. On the one hand, official emulation and retro releases are not enough for adequate preservation, since only a fraction of all games receive official ports, and only if publishers expect enough profit from them. Nevertheless, official releases of classics remain in wider circulation and are easier to recommend than downloading illegal ROMs and random emulators. Official marketing can also give attention to retro games that you might have missed yourself. For example, the remaster of Chrono Cross was the first time it was released in Europe, which is why I paid attention. Sonic's Mega Collection was a long time ago, for many not only a nostalgia trip, but also their entry into the Sonic series. Besides all variants and bonus variants of the mainline games, it had several additional titles, history videos, and even gimmicks like comic covers. This kind of content is rarely seen these days. Conversely, retro offerings are good deals for the publishers, quote-unquote warming up old contents and easily bridging the time between other major releases. But over time, some took that too literally. Because the problem is, the publisher's ambition is shrinking, but the prices are rising. Good retro offerings are far from impossible. Fan emulation shows that. Or the strong work of studios like M2, who recreated 16-bit games perfectly for modern monitors and released great collections from Castlevania and Contra to the Mega Drive Mini. Or the great first-person shooter remasters of Night Dive Studios. But know-how costs resources. The developers working on bad ports certainly don't want to release broken products. And to be fair, unlike private retro projects, the infrastructure is lacking. Hackers have access to community tools and are often specialized in exactly this kind of coding for their old favorite games. Major publishers like Nintendo and Sony want to fuel entire services with retro offerings. Third-party developers flooded Switch and PS4 with old games, but became less and less willing to fund the necessary development time and resources to keep up with minimum standards of illegal emulation. In 2006, the Wii on day one had extremely well emulated N64 games for download, but already Wii U had downgrades such as dark filters. And then on Switch followed the catastrophic launch of Mario Kart and Zelda. Through insiders we know that the first Wii emulation was based on the N64 Zelda port on GameCube. So there was a clear positive continuity of competence. After the programmer in charge parted ways with Nintendo, they started all over, and the result was poor emulation. A collection like Sonic Origins actually built upon the work of ambitious fans, yet in terms of content it is drastically reduced with 4 games compared to the old Mega Collection, especially since Sega turned basic features into DLC and only years later released a more full-fledged collection. Not to mention that it still had bugs and was missing music. It seems like a success when a retro release runs without glitches, but the content is often meager. The Super Mario 3D Collection was missing a mainline game, and Mario 64 was running with black bars, which hackers had fixed a long time ago. Still, they asked full price for it. Cheeky. Some releases, like old Star Wars or Need for Speed titles, are often old games repackaged in exact form, meaning functional but including all the old hiccups and without bonuses or improvements or additional sequels. Tales of Symphonia was re-released without its sequel and poor performance in 2023, making it inferior to its prior HD collection 10 years earlier. The Metal Gear Solid collection of 2023 and 24 seemed like a good deal, since it contained many important games of the series. But it still fell short compared to the PS3 Legacy collection over 1 decade earlier, which offered even more titles without being split into volumes and a stronger performance. Publishers know about the nostalgia value, so they can charge premium prices for weak offerings. In the long run, this only damages their image and the image of the games. Core fans switch to unofficial alternatives when it comes to suboptimal releases, while newcomers might not be able to cope with the messed up playability. And then many further classics remain locked away due to the publisher's wrong conclusions about weak sales. Glitchy remasters are often patched after a backlash, but such a backlash shouldn't happen in the first place. If there is less cheapness when renovating those classics, we would all benefit from that.